Hi, and thank you for joining us today on this episode of the Business Journal's podcast. I'm Naxiely Lopez, your managing editor and your host today. And today we are here with Kristen Mosbrucker-Garza, our intrepid reporter for the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal. So, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
For sure. And so we want to do this because we want to show our readers, our audience, who is working behind the scenes. And so Kristen is one of those journalists who is helping us cover some of the amazing things happening here in the Rio Grande Valley. So Kristen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. It's funny. When I explain journalism to a lot of people, I kind of say, we're not typically necessarily a white collar job or a blue collar job. We're kind of a soft collar job because we are out in the field. I typically am behind the camera. I just came from another event. And so I always wear shirts that I can crouch down to take photos with and stuff. And so you'll often see me in the field, maybe not so formally dressed. And I think it just kind of speaks to our industry. But my name's Kristen Mosbrucker-Garza. I'm a multimedia news reporter here for the Rio Grande Business Journal. And I am not originally from the Valley. I was actually born in New Jersey, though I don't tell a lot of people that. There's a lot of judgment, I think, of folks born in Jersey, but I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and in a small steel mountain town, actually. But I lived in Philadelphia for a number of years, and I never thought I was going to be a journalist or anything, but kind of fell into it and really enjoyed the sort of the journey of it. Mm-hmm. It can be a really dynamic career, and never did I ever think that I'd be working on the border again.
Well, and you say again, because she's no stranger to the Rio Grande Valley, right? You worked here before. This isn't your first stint as a journalist here. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, about 10 years ago, I was a business reporter. They told me it was the inaugural business reporter for the McAuliffe Monitor newspaper. And, there was a time when a lot of the stories that I was doing had to do with the economic impact of our communities. And so it was just, the Kristen Mosbrucker at the time. I was doing 6-7 front page stories a week. It was 10 years ago. So back in 2013, 2014 timeframe, there's so much news happening. I remember essentially being told, the Texas National Guard is coming to our front door. Go find someone who can talk about it. And it was a really intense introduction to this community that I kind of fell in love with, honestly. I learned so much, and the people here are so deeply kind and generous with their stories, and I really did enjoy it. I got pulled away over the years, but when I got the call to come back, I wouldn't say it was a difficult decision, because I remembered the sun, which I love, and the people. So I really appreciate that.
That's wonderful. And so you did leave the Monitor to go to the San Antonio Business Journal. So you don't have just the experience of working for it daily. You've also worked for a business journal before. Talk to us about that, and then what else you did after you left the Monitor.
For sure. So I used to cover technology and finance and the defense industry for the San Antonio Business Journal. I did that for, I think, maybe 4 years or so. I learned so much about the financial industry, about, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, so how to cover publicly traded companies, privately held companies, even some companies here along the border, IBC Bank. I'd listen into their, quarterly calls, and once in a while, schedule interviews with their CEOs. So I've done a lot of CEO interviews, and I really appreciated that skill set because it wasn't something that I would typically get at a daily newspaper as much. And I think that I really learned about business from a business owner's perspective or from an investor's perspective, which I also feel like is really unique about the business journals. Lettuce.
All right. Okay. And so you are a woman of many talents. When you first came down here, she gifted everybody a little container with honey that she produced herself. She is a beekeeper.
That's true. So technically the bees produced it, but I am a bee guardian of sorts. I've been wanting a beehive for years, and I was living most recently here in Philadelphia, and I had just had a couple of beehives inside of like a nature center, and then another near a horse barn. And who needs friends when you have 40,000 insects that can sting you? And I don't know, something about it just is really satisfying. And so, yeah, before I moved back down here, I harvested the honey, which is a pretty messy endeavor. And then, my spouse was able to strain it for me. And so I was able to give just some of that honey.
It was great. It was really great. I'm done with my container already. So thank you for that. But you also taught yourself how to code.
So yes, I did teach myself how to code, and particularly Python computer programming. And I did it because I'm really interested in data journalism, and I really enjoy being able to back up a lot of what I hear from people in the community with really the proof behind it. Just as an example, like last week, I had seen some of the retail sales data had come out. And so I actually just spoke with McAllen City Manager today about, how there are fewer retail storefronts, but actually higher gross retail sales. And he was saying that the city is starting a program because they've heard from local retailers that they are having a hard time. And so it's just kind of cool that, we can kind of bring together the anecdote and the data for just a more complete mirror of what's happening.
And it wasn't like one or two mom and pop stores. It was 1,900 retail outlets that just went away like that.
Yeah, the Rio Grande Valley, all 4 counties had 1,900 fewer as of second quarter. So as of June, from 2024 to 2025. But, it's sometimes I feel like when you do data journalism, you sort of end up with a mystery, and then you have to try to find out the answer. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it leads to better stories, right?
And that's something that you really do bring to the table. I think, just for our readers' sake, the first time that you turned in a story, it was 10 pages worth of electricity and everything that they're doing here in the Rio Grande Valley to get the electrical grid going. But yeah, you're very thorough with your reporting.
That's true. I guess I might be a bit of a nerd, but
I think we need to be. In this business, if we're not nerds, we're not really doing our job.
Yeah, and thankfully we split up that story into 3 stories. But I did do sort of a mini series about the electric grid and the sort of power future of the Rio Grande Valley. And I think a lot of people may think, well, it's just a utility, it's something that's a given, but actually it's really important for economic development. We just saw a giant data center sprout up outside of El Paso, and one of the reasons it came there, and I'm told not here, is because we just don't have sufficient capacity to bring electricity to power even our commercial corridors. Like, they're trying to build new substations in McAllen, and now they're several years behind because there was some community opposition to the project and other delays. And so it's just interesting that we are growing so fast as communities that the existing grid can't keep up, let alone new projects that want to come here.
And I think one of your stories mentioned that the demand in the past 3 years when it comes to electricity has been what they would normally see over a 30-year period in just 3 years. So, yeah, lots to unpack there.
For sure. No, I mean, I want to say they just came out, AEP Texas, with new data that the Rio Grande Valley alone, in its coverage area of AEP Texas, has used about 2 gigawatts worth of power just in the past year. And that's only projected to grow. And so, building out that network, and they are making investments. It's not necessarily that the company is not making investments, but they need to put that infrastructure somewhere, and nobody wants to live next to it.
Mm-hmm. And so that's not the only story you've covered. I mean, you've covered an ice rate for us. You've covered SpaceX, Starbase. Talk to us about that mix, and what have you seen, being away from the Valley for about 10 years, coming back, and first tell us what you've experienced, the growth you've seen, or not growth, but, and then some of the fun stories or interesting stories that you've covered for us.
I mean, I was really struck by just the sheer amount of retail stores, like along the expressway in all the various cities all across the Valley. Like, Rio Grande City had a Dutch Brothers coffee drive-through. I mean, the town that I grew up in, which, it had maybe 20,000 people, and, it was not necessarily a growing community, but, I mean, I would always think that we would have more stores than something like Rio Grande City, but I mean that they didn't just have the Dutch Brothers drive-through coffee. They had the Starbucks. They had local coffee shops. They had so much more retail and vibrancy than the last time I was out there. The last time I was out there, there was a panaderia, which was delicious, but it was the only place you could physically stop in. You had to just keep driving to your destination. And so just to see, all the different places that are obviously there for a reason, because there's more workers there, there's more jobs, there's more economic development. And then in McAllen, it's almost like unrecognizable. And then I was just in Brownsville as well. There's going to be like 2 or 3 brand new hotels of more than 150 rooms each, that's under construction right now. And then I did make the trek out to Starbase a couple times. I had been out there maybe about a year or 2 ago, actually, to go to Boca Chica Beach, because I used to go there, years and years ago. We used to kayak across the Brownsville shipping channel from South Padre Island. And it was just always a really beautiful area. And gosh, Starbase is far. It's a pretty remote city, but once you get there, I mean, there's so much traffic, and there are easily like hundreds of cars on just that one road, and you can tell there's like thousands of people working there. There's like so much construction, and then the city of Starbase, it's a gated city. It's obviously they have a Department of Defense contract, and so there's a lot of restrictions about what you're allowed to do, and where you're allowed to enter. But I went inside their temporary city hall, and they have a pretty engaged local community. They have a volunteer fire department now. But I mean, it's the newest city in Texas since the 1990s.
And we were giggling for about 20 minutes straight because, getting to the actual city hall was quite the ordeal. Talk to us about that.
Oh my gosh. So I don't know. I mean, you can chalk this up to, having not a lot of time and being on deadline for writing so many stories. But, I mean, typically when I've been to so many city council meetings so many years. So, I got there early. I felt confident. I was like, surely there's some kind of municipal building with maybe some visitor parking, and I can just, pull up and step in. Yeah, not even close. Google Maps, I don't know if it's a joke or a meme or what, directs if you say you're going to the city of Starbase and you're going to their city hall, it actually takes you to their rocket manufacturing facility. And so I pull up the first time, and I'm just following Google Maps. I thought I was on the right road. There are security canines. There are private security, like with weapons. And I just kind of get out of my car and I'm like, hi, like I'm a news reporter and I'm here for the commission meeting. And they were just like, yeah, this is like restricted area, you need to turn around immediately, like all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, can you tell me where City Hall is? And they were like, oh, just go out in the road and go down and then take a left. And I'm like, okay, and that big building? And they're like, yeah, that big building. Okay, so that big building is actually not City Hall either. There is no visitor parking. And so I just kind of was like, okay, I would ask people if I was like, am I going to get towed? Because I am literally like 25 miles into the middle of nowhere. So if I get towed,
it's going to be an issue.
I'm walking, right? I'm walking along a beach highway in the middle of the dark, right? In the middle of the night. And so I get to the second building. Another, paramilitary security guard was like, no, this is definitely not City Hall. This is actually our private offices. And there was you could see the manufacturing of the rockets in the background. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, because they couldn't be leasing space, right? I mean, they're sort of a company town in a lot of ways. So I didn't know if they were just leasing a conference room. And so finally she says, okay, actually what you need to do is you need to go through the gated community, which is the only place I didn't go. All of this is not gated, right? It says private property, but I assume there'd be some visitor parking. But she says, no, go through a gated community on a public street to a nondescript building with no signage, and that's our city hall. And I was like, are you sure that I can drive my car through there? Because I really do need my car to get home. And she was just like, yes, drive through. And I'm like, okay, well, honestly, I was a little skeptical. So I parked my car outside and then I walked through the city of Starbase. And it's still under construction. That's the thing a lot of people don't quite understand is there's still even the sidewalks and the utility, there's all these tiny homes. It's very idyllic, actually. Mm-hmm. There are people on bicycles. And I finally come to this nondescript gray building and there is a piece of paper taped on the door that said it was the city of Starbase, city commission meeting. And it's because they do lease a sort of common space from SpaceX to hold their meetings. And it is a temporary city hall. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they're building a new city hall, but I did get to connect with the city manager. So if you want to hear from Starbase's city manager, you can head to our website.
Or read about our exclusive or your exclusive, tell us about that.
Yeah. So I had noticed that the city was about to vote potentially on actually nearly doubling their size. So they were about 900 or so acres when they were formed, which is back in May. And then they were about to vote, I think a week or two ago, about adding another 1,200 acres to the size of their city. And it remains a little unclear about whether or not they'll be able to build on that because they do anticipate to protect some of that land as sort of a wetland or wildlife refuge of sorts. But I mean, doubling the size of your city is a pretty big deal, even for, a new city. And so, I got to talk to the city manager. They ended up tabling it. In part could be because the government shut down, the federal government, and they wanted to coordinate with them. But they basically said that they're looking for more information. Something to also note is that the folks who are on Starbase's commission are actually all employees of SpaceX. So when I say company town, I literally mean company town. So in a lot of ways, it's a little bit like, the city of Starbase says, SpaceX, does SpaceX want to do what SpaceX wants to do? And typically the answer is yes, because SpaceX has all the control, right? So it was actually kind of unusual that they didn't vote on what I thought they were going to vote on. So that's something to follow. But I really enjoyed just the experience of it. And then, of course, if you're there at night, the stars are really beautiful.
Wow. And so the exclusive, though, was about everything happening, all the building permits, that they've had in the past, since May is 5 months. Talk to us about the growth there. There's a new school that's going to go up. There's a hotel. What can you expect from, as far as growth from Starbase?
Yeah, so they had done sort of a building activity report. So in the first 4 months of the city being incorporated, they have processed several hundred building permits. And when I matched them up with what was going on at the state level, I found that, yes, there is this one sort of mixed use development that's pretty large. There's going to be like a restaurant that overlooks the Rio Grande Valley River. There is going to be what appears to be a private school. A lot of the families in the city of Starbase have small children. And so it seemed like that was important to folks. They're hiring for a hotel manager, but they haven't filed construction documents for a hotel quite yet. But there is another developer who claims to want to build a hotel and does have property. Because the other thing, not only does SpaceX sort of own the city and the council, but they actually also own the vast majority of the land. And so their development process is pretty quick because they have total control, right? But of the few parcels that are owned by other people, one of them is someone who has something right next to Gigabay or Mega Bay, whatever they want to call it. I think there's two separate ones, the rocket launching manufacturing facility. And they do have plans for a hotel, but I'm told that it probably won't be open to the public. And that's the other piece of this, is that while there's a lot of construction and growth and probably opportunity for contractors and subcontractors to, get in on the ground floor, I don't think a lot of this will be open to the general public.
All right, Kristen, anything else that you want our readers, our audience to know about you or the work that you're doing here at the Rio Grande Valley?
I think that the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal is going to fill a really important niche. I think that we really want to focus on the people who are building these businesses, because at the end of the day, a lot of business journalism is just the company, but it really is the people behind the companies. And so I personally would love to interview as many of the people as possible. So whether that's the CEO or someone in the C-suite, to really get a better sense about who they are and how they see themselves and where they see themselves building into the future. I think that that's really important. And I think that's something that's going to be unique. Also, I ran into some folks at a public event here as a reporter, and they asked me, "Oh, are you going to be just a real news publication with just the facts?" And yes, it's true. There's a lot of options when it comes to news information and media. And, I really do want people to know that, we are just interested in the facts. We don't have any partisanship. And I think that's really unique. And I think will really add to our economy here and will really help our communities understand what's going on around them.
All right. Well, you heard her, folks. If you have a news tip, if you'd like to connect with us, there are many ways you can do that. We have our social media channels. You can reach us at news@rgvbusinessjournal.com, or you can reach Kristen directly.
Yeah, so K Mosbrucker at rgvbusinessjournal.com. So K is in Kristen, Mosbrucker. It's pretty long, pretty unusual for our communities. So I run into a lot of people now, and the last time that they talked to a business news reporter was when they talked to me about 10 years ago. So don't be shy.
Right. And she speaks Spanish too, guys.
Oh,
We've been in
claro que
Reynosa, Matamoros. Ella entiende. No se preocupen. So, alrighty then. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for joining us today. And folks, keep sending us your story ideas, your tips, and keep reading and subscribing.